Ryan Carter tightened his grip on the steering wheel as the last rays of the setting sun dipped behind the row of houses lining the small town street. His body ached from a long day pouring concrete at the construction site, the kind of bone-deep fatigue that made every movement heavy. In the back seat of his old pickup truck, his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, had finally dozed off, her little head resting against the window and her worn stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. Ryan glanced at her in the rearview mirror, and despite his exhaustion, a faint smile crossed his face. Lily was the reason he kept going, the reason he worked overtime and skipped meals, the reason he never allowed himself to quit no matter how hard life pressed down. Tonight, all he wanted was to get home, heat up some leftover spaghetti, and tuck his little girl into bed. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. As he pulled into the gas station to fill up his nearly empty tank, he noticed a sleek black car parked to the side, its hazard lights blinking in the fading light. Standing beside it was a woman, elegant, clearly out of place in this small corner of town, pacing back and forth in her heels as she spoke into her phone. Her voice carried a sharp edge of frustration, her free hand on her hip as her eyes darted to the flat tire on her luxury sedan. Ryan hesitated for a moment, torn between his weariness and his instinct to help, before he sighed and stepped out of the truck. He moved closer and called out in his steady, gentle voice, "Need a hand?" The woman spun around, startled, her expression shifting quickly from suspicion to relief. She admitted she'd been stranded for nearly an hour, waiting for roadside assistance that hadn't come. Ryan crouched by the tire, rolling up his sleeves, his calloused hands moving with practiced ease. "I can get this sorted in no time," he said, already loosening the lug nuts. She introduced herself as Emily, her tone polished but tinged with embarrassment, as though she wasn't used to asking strangers for help. Ryan didn't say much, just focused on the task, his quiet competence speaking louder than words. Within minutes, the spare tire was secured, and Emily stood watching, impressed by the simplicity and generosity of the man who had dropped everything to help her without hesitation. She tried to hand him a crisp bill in gratitude, but he shook his head firmly, brushing the grease from his hands with a rag he pulled from his truck. "Just pay it forward," he said with a tired but genuine smile. At that moment, Lily stirred awake and rubbed her eyes, mumbling softly, "Daddy." Ryan scooped her up effortlessly, settling her against his shoulder with a tenderness that made Emily's heart catch. She had expected just another small-town mechanic, but instead she saw a father whose entire world revolved around the little girl in his arms. And as she stood there beneath the dim glow of the gas station lights, Emily realized this brief encounter was already something she wouldn't forget. Emily couldn't shake the image of Ryan from her mind in the days that followed, the rugged single dad with kind eyes and calloused hands who had changed her flat tire without asking for anything in return. In her world, where people often did favors with hidden motives or networking in mind, his quiet refusal of her money had left her strangely unsettled. She was used to men who boasted about their achievements, who expected recognition, who carried themselves with a certain arrogance that matched their expensive suits and polished shoes. Ryan, on the other hand, had been different, grounded, simple, and genuine in a way she rarely encountered. As a high-ranking marketing executive in a fast-paced city firm, Emily was accustomed to back-to-back meetings, high heels clicking against marble floors, and late dinners with clients in upscale restaurants, but not to the warmth of a man carrying his sleepy daughter with such tenderness, as if she were his entire universe. Her friends would laugh if they knew she had driven back to that small-town gas station twice that week, half hoping to see him again, but she couldn't deny the pull. Her chance came unexpectedly when she attended a school fundraiser her company was sponsoring, an event designed to raise money for local classrooms. Dressed in a tasteful blazer and tailored skirt, she had come out of obligation more than anything else, ready to smile politely and make a donation. But as she stepped into the crowded gymnasium filled with colorful posters and the scent of popcorn, her eyes caught on a familiar figure at one of the booths. There he was, Ryan, wearing a simple flannel shirt with rolled-up sleeves, serving hot dogs to kids and parents with an easy smile. Lily, the little girl she had seen asleep in the truck, was by his side, happily handing out napkins. For a moment, Emily hesitated, unsure if she should approach, but Lily solved the dilemma by trotting over to her with a bright smile. "Hi," she chirped, tugging at Emily's hand. "Are you my daddy's friend?" The innocence of the question caught Emily off guard, and she laughed, bending down to Lily's level to introduce herself. Soon she found herself at the booth beside Ryan, helping him serve, while his surprised expression softened into a welcoming smile. Throughout the evening, Emily watched him interact with the children and other parents, patient, kind, never raising his voice, never acting as though the long hours or financial strain weighed him down. He wasn't just a man who had helped her with her car, he was a man who carried himself with quiet strength and devotion. Still, she couldn't ignore the unspoken divide between them. Her colleagues and friends would scoff at the idea of her spending time in a school gymnasium, elbow-deep in ketchup and mustard, but here, surrounded by laughter and community, Emily felt oddly at home. And though Ryan kept their conversations polite, almost cautious, she sensed something unspoken in the way his eyes lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking, as if he too felt a connection neither of them fully understood yet. Over the next few weeks, Emily found herself drawn deeper into Ryan and Lily's world, a world far removed from her polished office towers and sleek apartments, yet one that made her feel more alive than she had in years. It started small, an invitation to join them for ice cream at the park after Lily's dance class, then an afternoon walk by the lake where Lily skipped stones and begged Emily to try, her laughter ringing out when Emily's stone plopped into the water without skipping at all. Slowly, what had begun as chance encounters turned into intentional time together, and Emily discovered she enjoyed the simplicity of it all, the joy of sitting on a park bench eating melting cones, the warmth of watching Ryan hoist Lily onto his shoulders, the quiet comfort of grocery shopping together where arguments over brands of cereal became moments of shared laughter. But as the bond between them grew, so did the invisible walls Ryan had built around himself. He carried his burdens heavily, often brushing off Emily's offers to help or steering conversations away from his struggles. Emily could see the strain in the way he rubbed his temples after long shifts, the worry that creased his brow when bills came due, the exhaustion he tried to mask with a brave smile for Lily's sake. She longed to ease his load, to remind him he didn't have to carry everything alone, but Ryan's pride bristled at the idea of accepting anything from her. He saw himself as a provider, a father who needed to stand on his own 2 feet, and the thought of leaning on someone who came from privilege made him feel exposed, vulnerable, even inadequate. The tension between them finally boiled over one rainy evening when Emily stopped by with groceries and an envelope to help with Lily's school fees. Ryan's face hardened the moment he saw it, his voice sharper than he intended as he said, "I don't need your charity, Emily. We're fine." Hurt flickered in her eyes, but she didn't back away. Instead, she held his gaze and spoke softly, her voice steady despite the sting of rejection. "It's not charity when it comes from love," she said, her words laced with an honesty that silenced him. For a long moment, Ryan stood frozen, torn between the instinct to push her away and the ache in his chest that whispered he wanted to let her in. He turned from her, struggling with the walls he had built to protect not just Lily's heart but his own, walls that had kept him safe from disappointment yet also kept him from happiness. Emily's presence in his life had begun to chip away at those defenses, and though he didn't yet know if he was ready to let them crumble completely, he couldn't deny that her words lingered long after she left that night, echoing in the quiet of his small home as Lily slept peacefully in the next room. The storm that had been building in Ryan's heart finally broke weeks later when Lily fell ill, her small frame trembling with fever that wouldn't break, her breathing shallow as he rushed her to the hospital in the middle of the night. Panic gripped him in a way even the hardest days on the job never had, and as he paced the sterile waiting room, running his hands through his hair and whispering prayers under his breath, he felt the weight of his world pressing down until he could barely breathe. He wasn't prepared to see Emily there, rushing through the sliding doors with worry etched across her face, her heels abandoned for sneakers, her usually polished appearance undone as if she had flown out the door without a second thought. She came straight to him, no questions asked, simply taking his trembling hand in hers as if it belonged there, grounding him in the moment. For hours she stayed by his side, through doctor updates, through restless pacing, through the silence that felt like an eternity. When at last Lily's fever broke and the little girl smiled weakly from her hospital bed, her small voice whispering, "Daddy," I like her. Ryan's heart shattered and healed all at once. He realized in that moment that Emily hadn't just been a fleeting presence, a passing kindness in the dark. She had become a part of their lives, a steady light when his world felt uncertain. Days later, when Lily was well enough to return home, Emily was still there, cooking soup in Ryan's tiny kitchen, reading Lily stories at bedtime, and filling their modest home with a warmth he hadn't realized had been missing. Slowly, Ryan allowed the walls he had clung to for so long to crumble, admitting to himself that he wasn't weak for letting someone in, that maybe real strength meant allowing yourself to be loved. Emily, too, found herself transformed. The woman who had once measured success in promotions, polished presentations, and expensive dinners now found her greatest joy in small moments, Lily's laughter echoing through the park, Ryan's rough hand brushing against hers as they walked home together, the comfort of shared silence at the end of a long day. Months later, standing in the crowded school auditorium as Lily beamed from the stage during her class play, Ryan glanced down at Emily beside him, her hand resting gently in his, and he marveled at how much his life had changed since that evening at the gas station when he had knelt by a stranger's car to change a flat tire. He had expected nothing in return that night, but fate had given him everything, a partner who saw him not for what he lacked, but for who he was, and a love that made their small family whole. And as Lily waved from the stage, shouting, "Daddy!" Emily, for everyone to hear, Ryan knew with absolute certainty that the life he once thought too broken to rebuild had found its missing piece.